Jill come forward and Bapak dan Ibu sekalian yang terhormat, Miss Jill Thomas akan mempresentasikan bahan mengenai Camden Asset Recovery Interagency Network dan saya akan menerjemahkan dari sini. Please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May I first express my gratitude and thanks to you all for inviting me from Europe to speak to you about a subject that I have been involved in for the last 12 years. This also applies whether you're an investigator trying to trace assets that have been sent to another jurisdiction, or a prosecutor trying to freeze, seize, and confiscate those assets that are located in another jurisdiction.
Ini juga berlaku baik ketika Bapak dan Ibu sekalian adalah seorang penyidik yang sedang mencoba untuk melakukan penelusuran atau pelacakan aset yang sudah dialihkan ke luar jurisdiksi.
In order to help you understand why we needed to create an informal network in this area, I would first like to give you a picture of the architecture in Europe around the time of the establishment of CARIN in respect of asset recovery. 10 years ago, the European Union had just expanded from 15 to 25 countries. It's now 28 countries. At this time, new laws drawing on the UN conventions and international conventions had been drafted in Europe and adopted to facilitate this international cooperation in the area of asset forfeiture. It was at this conference that the practitioners decided to form their own informal network in order to improve international cooperation. Europol offered to be the secretariat of that network, holding a list of contacts. This is a role that we still perform 10 years on, and it's that network that I would now like to introduce you to, in the hope that you will be able to use it and benefit from it during your own investigation and confiscation action through the recently established CARIN AP network. CARIN also has 3 associate members. These are members who are not involved in operational activity, so they don't have sight of investigative information or prosecutorial information, and they are the World Bank, the IMF, and the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, the UNODC.
Kemudian, CARIN juga memiliki skema associate members, yaitu anggota yang bukan merupakan organisasi, bukan merupakan lembaga penegak hukum dan tidak memiliki kegiatan yang sifatnya operasional, penyidikan maupun operasional penuntutan. Lembaga tersebut diantaranya adalah Bank Dunia, kemudian IMF dan UNODC.
Information that you might be interested in might be information on bank accounts, the ownership of bank accounts, real estate, land ownership, information on vehicle ownership, boats or sea vessels, companies and the directors and secretaries of those companies. Very important when you're tracing assets, law enforcement intelligence and information on previous convictions or previous attempted prosecutions. All this information is accessible either directly or indirectly via the CARIN contact in each jurisdiction. If you are a prosecutor and your task is, once the assets are identified, you want to freeze or seize those assets, What you would be interested in doing in another jurisdiction is seeking help to enforce the freezing and seizing orders that you have. If you are a prosecutor, what you will need assistance with in another jurisdiction is the enforcement of freezing and seizure orders, assistance with the knowledge of how that jurisdiction is going to manage your assets during the process of during the judicial process leading up to the final judgment. Assistance with enforcing confiscation orders, the repatriation of assets to victims, also very important, and agreements for sharing of assets between jurisdictions. These are some statistics that my office gathered recently, and I won't go into the detail of the text on the slide, but only to say that although the figures indicate the total confiscation between 2010 and 2013 has increased, I can tell you that in 2010 only 7 out of 28 jurisdictions were able to answer that question, and by 2013 that had increased to 9 jurisdictions from 28. So it's very important to look into the detail of statistics. I'm happy to share those statistics with you, but with the understanding that, as you can see, they are very incomplete. This is a general aviation aircraft that was forfeited in Victoria, Australia last year.
Jadi ini adalah pesawat kecil yang dirampas di negara bagian Victoria, Australia pada tahun yang lalu.
This is a Bell 206 helicopter which was used on several occasions to import cocaine from the United States to Canada. The pilot, who was actually an unlicensed pilot, videoed himself whilst using cocaine whilst apparently operating the helicopter. This was subsequently forfeited in Canada using the civil forfeiture process. This is a Ferrari that was confiscated this year in Melbourne, Australia.
Nah, ini adalah gambar Ferrari yang berhasil dirampas pada tahun ini di Melbourne, Australia.
A yacht also confiscated in Australia.
Kapal pesiar kecil atau yacht yang berhasil juga dirampas di Australia.
And this final slide, you can see 3 images. These were all confiscated using the non-conviction based civil forfeiture process in Canada. The first photograph is the gate to a Hells Angels clubhouse. That clubhouse is actually in the process of being forfeited at the moment. The second photograph is of gold and silver coins forfeited as part of a money laundering and fraud scheme. And finally, that I'm told is $1 million in cash seized from organised crime. Actually, that is drug money.
Jadi ada 3 foto yang dipaparkan pada slide Ibu Thomas. Yang pertama itu dirampas dengan menggunakan rejim perampas non-conviction based civil forfeiture atau perampasan yang tidak memerlukan putusan pidana di Kanada. Jadi yang pertama adalah foto gerbang kepada clubhouse Hells Angels. Hells Angels ini klub itu bikers di Amerika. Jadi clubhouse tersebut sedang dalam proses untuk dilakukan perampasan. Kemudian foto kedua adalah foto emas dan koin-koin emas dan perak yang dirampas karena merupakan hasil dari pencucian uang atau skema penipuan. Kemudian foto ketiga adalah $1 juta tunai yang disita dari kejahatan terorganisir, yaitu organized crime berkaitan dengan drugs atau narkoba. Jadi foto 1, 2, dan 3 tersebut digunakan, mengklarifikasi, jadi digunakan, dirampas dengan menggunakan non-conviction based civil forfeiture yang berlaku di Kanada.
And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to your questions.